Conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. This and more. Streaming on the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हैं क्योंकि सभी लोग कर रहे हैं.
Coaching is now starting from grade 3, 4, 5, 6.
होता जाने वाली बीच राह में आधे टेस्ट देके हैं सिलेक्शन की चाह में.
ऑल इंडिया का बच्चा कोटा जाता है.
This rat race is for rats, not for humans. So why should we even be a part of it?
The Rat Race. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Hello, you're watching News9 Live. In a whirlwind 36 hours, Russia found itself confronting an imminent armed uprising, prompting President Vladimir Putin to pledge retribution against the advancing Wagner fighters who were heading towards Moscow and capturing several cities along the way. I have my colleague Pankaj Mishra with me, who shall also take you through as to what is the latest on the confrontation. Pankaj.
Well, indeed, Sudha, the way things have descended on Russia in the last 36 hours, unprecedented was the key word that came across from each and everyone. But a sudden agreement with the Belarusian government, Lukashenko, came into the rescue. And now, despite this temporary resolution, what many experts are saying is whether this peace would endure. Sudha.
Despite the temporary resolution, uncertainties lingered, with experts cautioning that the rare insurrection is unlikely to dissipate very easily without any future repercussions.
And now, Sudha, the obvious question is, Putin must navigate the aftermath of one of the most significant challenges to his authority since assuming power in 2000. The world watches nervously as a sequence of dramatic events unfolded, drawing enthusiastic support from Ukraine, obviously. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the outspoken leader of Wagner Group, will now be reportedly depart from Belarus for Belarus unharmed, but his actions may have made him more vulnerable than before. Sudha.
Now, like Pankaj said and, gave you the lay of the land, as it were, here's what we currently understand. On Saturday, Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, agreed to leave Russia and relocate to neighboring Belarus. The arrangement appears to have been facilitated by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. According to a Kremlin spokesperson, the agreement entails Prigozhin ordering his troops to halt their advance towards the capital. Pankaj?
Well, Sudha, this is the latest that we have gathered, and also we have got the reactions from both the sides, from the Russian side and from Prigozhin's side. Let's listen in to what both the parties had to say and what lies ahead could be read between the lines.
We just heard a loud bang near the headquarters of the military headquarters here in Rostov, and we heard the screams for us to run away from this place as soon as possible. You can see a lot of people are running, but I guess we can slow down. Right now we got away. Where are you guys from?
From Morocco.
Morocco?
Yeah.
What do you think about everything? What's happening here?
I don't know, it's something strange.
Сейчас наступил тот момент, когда кровь может пролиться. Поэтому, понимая всю ответственность за то, что будет пролита русская кровь, с одной из сторон, мы разворачиваем свои колонны и уходим в обратном направлении в полевые лагеря согласно плану.
Была достигнута договоренность о том, что ЧВК «Вагнер» вернется в свои лагеря расположения. Часть из них, которые это пожелает, в дальнейшем подпишет контракты с Министерством обороны. Это касается той части, которая не приняла участие вот в этом вот походе. Что касается остальных бойцов, их никто не будет преследовать с учетом их заслуг на фронте. Мы всегда с уважением относились к их героическим поступкам на фронте и будем всегда это уважение хранить. Вы спросите меня, что будет лично с Пригожиным. Уголовное дело будет прекращено в отношении него. И сам он уйдет в Беларусь. Была высшая цель избежать кровопролития, избежать конфронтации внутренней, избежать столкновений с непредсказуемыми результатами. И именно во имя этих целей были реализованы посреднические усилия Лукашенко, и президент Путин принял соответствующее решение. Эти вопросы входят в исключительную прерогативу и компетентность Верховного Главнокомандующего в соответствии с Конституцией Российской Федерации. Поэтому эти темы вряд ли могли обсуждаться в ходе упомянутых контактов. Ни в коем случае СВО продолжается. Наши бойцы на передней линии проявляют героизм. Они весьма эффективно и успешно отражают контрнаступление вооруженных сил Украины. И операция будет продолжаться. Вы наверняка спросите меня, почему именно президент Лукашенко. Дело в том, что Александр Григорьевич давно лично знаком с Пригожиным, около 20 лет. И это было его личное инициативное предложение, которое было согласовано с президентом Путиным.
Even as Prigozhin and his mercenary army or militia is retreating and perhaps taking refuge in Belarus even as we speak, or maybe backroom parleys are going on, the most important question at this time is, which I'm sure all of you are thinking, is, has Putin come out stronger or weaker? Is he still the man he was before these 36 hours, or his position has rather been kind of diluted? Let me introduce the guest today to join us, Ambassador Skand Rajan Tayal, who's former diplomat, and Major General retired Sudhakarji, VSM, defense and geopolitics expert. A very, very warm welcome to both of you. Ambassador Tayal, everybody and anybody is only thinking about this nail-biting confrontation between the Wagner militia and Putin. Has he come out stronger? Has he shown resilience? Or he's actually backed off with a little help from his friends?
I think President Vladimir Putin has come out weaker. If we look at these, both Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu as well as Yevgeny Prigozhin are actually creations of Vladimir Putin. Shoigu has been defense minister since 2012, 11 years. We should also note that he is from the Home Guards kind of organization in Russia. He is not a blue-blooded army person. And so there could be some dissonance between him as a defense minister and his generals. And we all know that the Russian army has not prosecuted the war very well in Ukraine. Similarly, Prigozhin was, of course, a convict and has a very shady past. And he ran some restaurants and then became close to Vladimir Putin when he was in St. Petersburg. And after all, Wagner Group gets all its money, ammunition, equipment, support from Russia. from Russian army. So it is with the approval of Putin. So both the two proteges fell out, and Prigozhin was repeatedly criticizing Russian army as well as personally by name Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, and Putin was not able to control that. So at some point, Prigozhin did become a rogue creation of President Putin, and the way he could march or his forces could go up to almost 200 kilometers of Moscow, General Saab will talk about it. There was no resistance from the forces in between the whatever the Russian army was there in these two cities, Voronezh and Rostov-on-Don. They did not put up any resistance. So is there some great dissonance within the Russian army against Shoigu? These things remain to be watched, and President Putin seems to have emerged as a very weak party.
Yes. General Sudhakarji, let me come to you because the ambassador has given me a very good talking point. Look, he first challenges Shoigu and says that what was done to his troops was something, he said, it was almost like stabbing us. I'm using Putin's words, stabbing, the chief of Wagner army in his back. And then the entire thing begins. But what is the most important thing here, General Saab, is the quick succession with which it started. I mean, you are an expert, but it is very hard, Pankaj, wouldn't you agree that it is very hard to believe that someone embedded within the army of the Russian army was not really in cahoots with the militia army? It was a kind of, let's ambush, but let's keep quiet about it. Ambushes are usually quiet, of course.
Well, good morning. Firstly, thank you for inviting me to your show. Excellent question you have asked. In fact, I would say these questions should come out in the mainstream channel, and your channel is new relatively. So you are throwing up a question which has got a lot of relevance. So very quick points. First and foremost, the viewers must understand what this group is all about. This is a kind of a group which has come into existence purely out of criminals. It is on the concept of Second World War when the Nazi forces, they had created a division like this, and they wanted to penetrate the Warsaw Pact countries and defeat them effectively and dispose of. They're like, for short of expression, cannon fodder. They could be used and discarded anytime. So with that kind of a preamble and backdrop, let me just build it up. That the chief of Wagner Group, he himself is a criminal. He got into some hot dog business and gradually started expanding the business and managed to secure regular visits and the commitment of the leadership of the Russian forces and the political dispensation. So much so the Putin also got into, they developed a kind of a relationship, and by what has happened is that the group, this is a very, very dangerous thing which is taking a turn in the global order. My personal opinion, when you have a discussion, I'll give my perspective. Very dangerous turn. These are private armies. This Wagner Group is not only operating in Ukraine and in Russia-Ukraine war, it is there in Middle East, it is there, operated in Syria. It has been there in West Africa, Northwest Africa, it is in Mali, it is there in Latin America and Venezuela. Very, very successful narratives have been actually painted by these people. So, but these are all cannon fodder, disposable anytime. So having said all this, let me just try and respond to your query. What has gone wrong? There is something which has gone drastically wrong. Same other people who had been initially last year in the month of February, they have been inducted into Kiev to carry out or prosecute a very clandestine assassination of Zelensky. They failed. They came back and they had nothing to actually, share a success story to the Russian partners. So when they came back unsuccessful, they applied themselves at different places. They operated along the eastern flank of Ukraine, and particularly the Bakhmut battle. Bakhmut battle has actually lasted for more than 6 months, or maybe 6.5 or 7 odd months. But what is actually not coming out in the media is that the Russian forces, being conscripts, lack of training by of the soldiers, The new soldiers are coming in, old soldiers are going out very fast. Lack of continuity. They have the state-of-the-art technology available. They have the rocket forces. They have the missile technology. Air Force is non-operational to large an extent. I would say drone warfare is playing a very active role. They have by and by realized that the Russian forces, for some reason, they have not been able to deliver what was expected of them. So, for short of expression, I would say the leader of the Wagner Group has been telling people in Russian armed forces and the hierarchy that the operations are getting botched up by the Russian forces. They could have executed or prosecuted the offensive against the Ukraine in a much more effective manner. So therefore, this particular point which he is sharing is not being heard by people who matter. They said he is trying to create a rift and schism within the Russian forces. And thus, since he has not been heard so far, he's taken up a kind of a rebellious movement and want to mutiny against the government of Russia and heading towards Russia, like the ambassador very rightly brought out. It's a distance of 1,100 kilometers from Rostov. Rostov is a major communication center. All the components, be it the Crimea or the Kherson or Zaporizhia or Donetsk, or Luhansk, any of these places, all the network of connectivity actually emanates from this communication center. They have a regional headquarters. They have very conveniently come and occupied the regional headquarters. What can the Russian force do? So therefore, if they start building up, which I am told as per my unofficial inputs from my friends in Russia, they say they have started coming in piecemeal method. They have entered into Moscow in small team groups. They have started making their presence felt. All over the Moscow surrounding areas. Unfortunately, the Russian forces, they have got an inbuilt system of preventing such kind of military coup or such kind of activities against the government forces. They have layers of them. So hopefully they will play a better and effective role to prevent such kind of disaster coming on.
General Saab, Pankaj and I, before we started the show, we were discussing about this intrigue, about how is it possible. Imagine someone who flips burgers, a chef, suddenly takes charge and creates such a challenge. Pankaj, we were talking about the documentary, right, that we have?
Indeed, and Major General Sudhakarji, when he mentions how critical the role of this Wagner Group as a private army is in this bigger scheme of things, it actually raises more questions than it answers. And effectively speaking, for Putin, obviously, Sudha, it reminded me, draw a parallel between what Hillary Clinton has had said about Taliban, that if you have snakes in your backyard, with reference to Pakistan, you can't expect it to only to bite your neighbors. Now, this particular issue of having a private army, and Putin has been using it for a long time, not just in the Russian region, but also in African region, West Asia, as well as Major General Sudhakarji was mentioning. We have a special report here, a documentary, which actually tells you that how this private army works as a corporate and why it has been in business so far. Let's quickly take a look at that, and then we open the house for discussions once again.
They are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war.
If they do something which is illegal as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them.
In 2014, the Wagner Group gained prominence for fighting alongside Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. It was founded by a Ukrainian-born Russian army officer, Dmitry Utkin, and he was working with military intelligence GRU. Utkin is reportedly a Nazi sympathizer and named his group after Richard Wagner. He's a German composer whose works were appropriated by Hitler. So, Out here, the Wagner Group seems to be a brainchild of an intelligence agency created to fulfill the objective of its political master without being under the legal framework of a regular army. And of course, the master is obviously Vladimir Putin.
It is Prigozhin, who is a businessman very close to Putin. He has actually taken over this group, and now he constituted the Wagner Group, and now he is heading the Wagner Group. And officially, this group has been recognized by Russia as listed as a private company in 2022. President Putin is not directly dealing with Wagner army, though it is supposed to be affiliated under the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Armed Forces. Some of them are special forces officers from the Spetsnaz group, but majority of them are the people who are the criminals.
TV9 को विशेष तौर पर इजाजत मिली है, उन्हें आमंत्रित किया गया है कि हम वैगनर ग्रुप के हेडक्वार्टर को दिखाएं। आज TV9 के कैमरे पर आप वो देख रहे हैं जो कभी नहीं देखा होगा।
It was like a surprise for me when I saw that their headquarters. It was a 24-floor building, a very high quality building. I have even not seen such kind of building in New York or Paris. I just joked with the guy who was coordinating with me for the Wagner headquarters that am I in Langley or am I in some KGB headquarters? And he was saying, no, you are in a corporate office.
Such forces not always work in uniform. Such forces are so trained and recruited in a manner in which they can do multifarious tasks. There would be some people in this force who would work in civilian dress and make friends and gather intelligence. There will be some who will be hardcore, who may even get tasks of assassination somebody. They are reasonably well organized in the same pattern and lines as the regular army.
It's based on the experience of the person, his physical condition, his age, and his intellect level. So it's very specific.
They were saying that we are actually trying to build a new kind of force, and if you see after Bakhmut, finally they proved that they are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
The capture of Bakhmut city by Wagner is possibly the first time a mercenary group has fulfilled such a vital military objective and set a new standard in conventional warfare. The city has been flattened completely, and then the Wagner Group handed over the city to the Russian regulars, who then gave up all the advantages, suffered reverses as Ukrainian forces captured some nearby villages. And this led to a public outburst by the Wagner chief. And this clearly indicates that the Russian regulars and the militia are not on the same page, suggesting that a two-pronged war effort such as this has its drawbacks.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war, because the army will always be uncomfortable with a private army, and a regular army would not like anyone else to take credit for capture of a Bakhmut, which has been just going on since last 10 months.
It was a big pressure on Russian army that they have to also perform. So what I realized that after a certain period of time, if any country is going on war, they would like to hire any private military company like Wagner or anyone else.
So it's a multi-dimensional, multicultural, multitasking force, not under the purview of the law. As far as the world is concerned, if they do something which is illegal, as far as what you call as war crime, then you will not be able to charge them under a war crime, because Russian government says no, they're not under a regular military law.
Some countries have flirted with the idea of private contractors to wage a war. Of course, most notably is the US, which they did in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Wagner Group's success in the battlefields of Ukraine is now being seen as a dangerous template, but opposed by many, including those in India.
Private army is of no relevance. If we even think about it, it is something like Pakistan. They created, the ISI created so many terrorist groups. Where are those terrorists today? They are impacting them finally. So they had a problem the Russian army had a problem of motivation, of morale, of recruits not coming forth, and therefore India, there is no dearth of recruitment.
There are countries and regions where Wagner people have been used, say for example in Syria, in Lebanon, in South Africa, but they will only go and fight in these areas in support of the Russian interest.
The concept of private armies is more prevalent in authoritarian regimes, but it can also be seen as private contractors in countries with democratic setups, but at a smaller scale when we compare it to the Wagner Group. So the fallout of using such private armies can be messy. But from a very brute military point of view, private militia can help in situations where regular armies cannot.
So one of the most succinct documentaries on private militia, that is the Wagner army. But there are lots of questions that actually, if you connect the film with the 36 hours of a face-off, then one question which comes to one's mind is, and which will go to Ambassador Tayal, is that now we see that the Wagner chief, the man here, Prigozhin, he's now on his way to Belarus, and there were a lot of backroom parleys. But will he be neutralized? That is one question, because it's obvious that he's the one who started the fire, Ambassador.
I would think so. President Vladimir Putin is not known for any kind of forgiveness, or he is a spy himself. It was a mutiny. It was a mutiny against his regular army, his regular defense minister, and he said so that he has been stabbed in the back, and only a friend, Brutus, he stabbed in the back. But yes, they have wanted to avoid this bloodshed, and it would have been very bloody. But again, I will ask this question that when all this column was going towards Moscow, why was it not bombarded by the Russian air forces? Only one missile strike was there, like a signal to Prigozhin that if you don't go back, then we can do this to you. So something was going on, and this fellow has been a friend of Lukashenko for 20 years. So Lukashenko will give him sanctuary, but if he is allowed to live there, he will certainly emerge as an alternative center of attraction to the Russian army above all, as well as to the Russian people. And Putin cannot afford that. We know what he did to Yavelny and all that. So he will be neutralized with the help of Lukashenko if he is allowed to live there. This gentleman is very active on his WhatsApp and all kinds of things. And since again I will say, the Russian army columns who were there in these two cities, they did not resist his capture, headquarters capture by Wagner. So there is an undercurrent of sympathy for him apparently.
Right. Pankaj, what we read in newspapers, and we've been up the whole night reading about this entire face-off, that what actually Lukashenko did was backroom parleys, calling this person, calling that person. There was back and forth between him and Putin. But Pankaj, I want to ask you that what is it, before we go to General Sudhakar Saab, that I want to ask you that what is it, what must have made Lukashenko suggest, okay, back off, beat the retreat, let's now you come to Belarus, no charges against you, no charges against your soldier. It is a kind of an olive branch, as it were.
Definitely, Sudha. This whole development and that transpired in the last 10 to 12 hours obviously is a mix of both diplomatic and strategic moves. Lukashenko, obviously acting on the behest of Vladimir Putin, I would say, was given the job to give the Wagner Group a safe passage, because they were on the other side heading towards Moscow, and all preparations were on, because Moscow, if you look at the geographical positioning of Moscow, there are no natural barriers. There is no sea that divides Moscow from rest of the Russian landmass, or there is no terrain that has to be covered to reach Moscow. Actually, soldiers on foot can reach Moscow. So that's why the deployment of landmines, the sandbagging was done, and all the preparations was up. But for Lukashenko, obviously, this was a multi-pronged strategy. Remember, it was not just Lukashenko who was at play. There were Chechen forces also who had come, to Moscow to support the garrisoning of the city. But talking in terms of both diplomatic and strategic measures, whether and what lies ahead for Wagner Group chief Prigozhin, that was a decisive factor. And knowing for a fact that with 25,000 forces, you can't take on the Russian military altogether. So that was a crucial issue, and I think Major General Sudhakarji would also be able to throw some light on
so General Sudhakar, like Pankaj was talking about, there are two things. Look at, okay, in a situation like that where people were paranoid, where there was, a war approaching your doorstep anytime by this, if I may use the word, rogue militia, as it were, with the Russian army kind of taking a backseat. We've seen videos of also, Prigozhin talking to Russian soldiers in this very upfront manner that, what are you thinking? Why don't you give up, etc., etc. So I'm asking you, in this thing, do you think that Wagner will be neutralized in some fashion once he goes to Belarus? And also the next question is, what happens to the 25,000 ragtag militia army that he is been helming? General Saab.
Sudha, brilliant question. We need to understand, our viewers have to understand that the total force of Wagner is, at some places it is showing as 30,000, but actually it's around 25,000. Now, the entire strength of 25,000, to the best of my research and understanding, is not operating along the axis Rostov to Moscow. You have mostly, strength of 5,000 odd people in that sector. Maybe 5 to 10,000 in Syria and Middle East, maybe 10,000 in West Africa. Right. So, to my understanding, this is how it is divided. So, when you come to, take into that bin counts of soldiers in Russia-Ukraine corridor or sector, it will not be more than 10,000 to my assessment. Max, I would say. And to my reckoning, the lower level is going to be the 5,000 odd soldiers. So that is one part. Second part, Sudha, is that we need to understand it's a great game being played. What is visible, actually there is much more that doesn't actually.
Yeah.
So what is that great game? The great game is, under the circumstances, the Western alliances. What is the aim of the America having come in and rejuvenated the transatlantic relationship with the Europe? They had fallen apart prior to beginning of this conflict in 2022. But this conflict has actually brought or revived the relationship, or the rejuvenated the transatlantic relationship, that is USA, Canada across the Atlantic, and the European Union and UK to a large extent. Also mindful of the fact that the economic might of the European Union and the UK, which had grown, was coming at par, almost at a challenging level with that of across the Atlantic with the US and Canada. They also have been reduced in their military, the economic might. But the worst thing that has happened is, while the European Union and other countries, they were dependent on the NATO forces for the military strain, because of this particular new development, the militarization has actually caught roots. A huge amount of money is being spent to enhance their defense capabilities. So that is second part. Third part, I would like to say, there is a move, to my assessment. I'm suspecting that some kind of a subversion has been triggered, and the mood swing that we witnessed today in the Wagner Group could have been triggered or initiated by people who are allied towards the Western alliances. The basic aim and objective is to carry out a regime change. So, keeping all these factors in view, so that one more minute, if you allow me, that Putin is an intelligence corps officer. He's gone through the hard grind. He's grown through his the political leadership role, brought up Moscow or Russia from wherever they were in 2000 post disinter. Mind you,
Right.
it is a superpower. USSR used to be a superpower. It has got the largest nuclear arsenal. Today, they have that emotional connect of being a superpower. So, therefore, they would like to, and this is the only country in the world which is actually carrying out a successful military operation with flag held high. So that brings me to the point. This man, if I put my feet in his shoes with due empathy, he is not going to spare the Wagner chief. He will hold him to task. Maybe he is going to be eliminated. That is what I'm fearing. And people who are found defaulted,
Something
they will be
that
put
we spoke that
some legal process.
yeah,
There will be something
I'm
which will be
glad
done. That is it.
I'm glad you say, General Saab, that he could be eliminated. Pankaj and I were having a discussion. Pankaj had said eliminated, I had said neutralized. I said let's not be warmongers, let's not use very strong. But Pankaj, you've been proven right, and that brings us to the next question.
Well, indeed, Sudha, and both the gentlemen obviously have also underlined very significant aspects, whether there was a third party involved or not, or whether there was an external thing at play. And I would just, for the benefit of our viewers and for the sheer number, let me also bring in, before I, bring in Ambassador Skandar Rajan Thayal here. Remember, Sudha, yesterday, at around St. Petersburg area, there were card boxes which were found to be carrying cash, which was 4 billion rubles, which translates to 47 million US dollars in cash. Now, my point, when we were having discussion with our editor also, he pointed out the fact that it could be because of money, whether the American interests or European Union interests could have come into play. But remember, the corporate group, which has 47 million US dollars in cash stashed in card boxes in St. Petersburg, where their corporate office is placed somewhere else. So I don't think the money part is, at play
Pankaj,
here.
it actually reminds me of one of our neighboring countries where the feudal lords take over, where the army takes over in quick succession. It's very, very surprising, really. It's shocking, actually.
Indeed. And so that, from that point of view, Ambassador Thayal, it becomes very crucial here to note how the Ukrainian theater and Russia's role would play out now, because we have a situation here where Ukrainians would say, hey, look, Russia can't even keep its house in order. And that's why, is this emerging as a weaker point for Putin's stand in the fight that is ongoing right now at the Ukrainian frontiers?
The question is, will he vacate or will he continue this theater of war? He's been at it, and now with this setback, don't you think?
It's a loss of face.
It's a loss of face for Putin. Ambassador, what do you think?
No, he will certainly not vacate. It will be an absolute disaster for him. Now, let us try to desegregate these issues. Putin, as per even Western media assessments, has about 80% approval rating in Russia among the masses, even as per the Western media. There is no economic hardship which has been reported for the Russian people, and so that is not an issue. The issue here is where does the loyalty of Russian army lie? And since they did not resist Wagner, then do they have some sympathy with whatever he has been saying and against Shoigu, etc., against the top leadership of Russian army, which tangentially affects Putin. But Putin is his own persona is of a strong man riding the horses and bare-chested and this, that, and the other. And he cannot show a face to the Russian masses that he retreated from Ukraine. He will not retreat. This will continue like the First World War, trench warfare, because the Russian army is incapable, incompetent to really defeat Ukrainians may advance here and there a little bit, but I think General Saab will know better. But this is likely to continue like that. But I do not foresee at all. But another point I will add is that a magnet where the anti-Putin forces could coalesce. Putin cannot allow that magnet to remain alive or active in any other country, and it is just a matter of time that he will be silenced, either neutralized or eliminated. Otherwise, he will pose a living challenge to Putin, and Putin will not be able to trust his own army people, the army generals, that who is siding with Prigozhin.
Right. Major General Sudhakarji, the scenario that is evolving as of now clearly places Putin, or at least his image, on the back foot. Talking in terms of strategic moves here, do you believe that the kind of support, the kind of upper hand at times the Russian forces had maintained during this ongoing war scenario, psychologically, how important it is to keep the momentum going? And with this kind of loss of face or loss of I would say the motivation for the forces, do you believe that it is going to cost Putin on the frontiers?
Pankaj, excellent question. Being a soldier, I would comment
yes, sir.
in a manner so as to present how do I convey this. Okay. First and foremost thing is that we need to understand the larger picture. The larger picture being what I have narrated in your previous question or responded, is that there is a pivot. The global pivot, or pivot of Asia has shifted. Instead of West Asia, it has shifted to Indo-Pacific. This is a kind of a temporary distraction, I would say, by the Western alliances. And the European conflict will go on like this, like the ambassador has very rightly said. I am also totally endorsing whatever he is saying. But it is actually entering a very, very difficult phase of warfare. And that difficult phase of warfare is that, let me put the perspective right. A perspective is Russia, to my best of understanding, has got what exactly they wanted, or what they may have wanted to have more, but they are satisfied with, and they have gone in for a strategic defensive posture. In some of the media, you would have come across that while the Bakhmut war was going on, conflict was in full swing for 7 or 8 months, whatever time, that time was utilized. That's why they call it as the meat grinder. They managed to draw the attention of the Ukrainian forces to Bakhmut, and thereby enabling the Russian forces to go in for strategic defensive posture. Now, what is the strategic defensive posture? All along the eastern border for 550 to 600 kilometers, north-south I am talking of, they have gone in for layers of defenses, something that they had done during the Second World War, and at an intercept distance of a couple of kilometers. Now, these layers of defenses are very difficult to be breached by the regular forces of the Ukrainian army. So if a conventional force cannot breach, despite the kind of state-of-the-art equipments, whether tanks or your Patriot missiles having come in, the standoff attacking weapon platforms, aircrafts are being bid for, if the conventional forces cannot breach, then do they have an option for the unconventional resources? Yes, the answer is yes. Like the mercenary forces are here in case of Russia, Ukraine also has got mercenary forces. They have something close to almost 1.37 lakhs, if I am not wrong. So therefore, it will actually trigger a kind of a guerrilla warfare in the areas of Donetsk, all these 4 or 5 provinces that Russia has already liberated, or call them, they're going for the elections now. Last but not the least, is that Putin, as per my understanding, he is not going to quit so fast. There is going to be a huge geopolitical cost. Firstly, it is personal credibility and image. Secondly, there is a kind of alliance between Russia and China. These are the 2 important communist nations in the world. Cuba may have added in. They are trying to expand their alliances, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Cuba, and all such kind of countries. Mind you, there is going to be a strong division. Do not forget about the issue of BRICS. BRICS today, in addition to 5 countries, there are 19 countries which have lined up. First week of July is going to tell us who all are going to be forming part of the BRICS. Same in the case of Shanghai Cooperation. So all such kinds of groupings and alliances are emerging. Therefore, I don't think Putin is going to give us so fast. He is going to give a fight to this complete emerging situation, take people to task, and give a fitting response to the.
You know, General Sudhakar, you said take people to task. We are getting reports that there are going to be major changes in the army establishment. Apparently, Putin is going to hold a meeting, and perhaps there will be a change in guard, as in the chief of army. Putin is thinking of replacing him with somebody who can perhaps handle the situation better. But in all this, defense minister is also in focus. My question to you, one, do you think there should be a change? But somehow it seems that the change will also show up Putin's chink in his armor, because it's like, I couldn't handle it, you come take over, the situation has changed so kind of swiftly in the last 36 hours. And the next is, what happens to the defense minister, who seems to be actually the man that the Wagner chief was accusing of having spilled blood for the longest time?
Sudha, if that question is meant for me,
yes, sir.
Quick answers. You see, but this particular development would have surprised most of us who have not been able to see beyond what is visible, or not been able to join the dots. I, as a military analyst, I have been anticipating something like this is going to happen. Whether it is the handiwork of the Western alliances, or it is within the frustration which is actually emerging because of the botched-up operations by, alleged botched-up operation by Russian forces, it was actually expected. I was expecting something like this. So it has happened. So if I can expect sitting 10,000 miles away from Russia, so why not Putin, who's a military man? He also would have anticipated. He has got his special forces. There are special forces who have penetrated, who are keeping a watch on all these developments taking place. So therefore, what I'm coming to is, to answer your question, firstly, he should have, as a shrewd military leader, he should have identified the alternatives, substitutes of the generalships and the commanders who have not been able to perform. Military operations in such kind of scenario are very, very critical activities. So unless he has to have his finger on the pulse, he must know what is happening, where things are moving and where not moving, where people are not able to meet or deliver as per his expected lines and the milestones. So he would have carried out identification of the military leadership. There is going to be a changeover. This is my analysis. I may be wrong.
Right.
And the defense minister that you are talking of, it's a very sensitive appointment as of now. But yes, I personally feel he, as a very effective and meaningful substantive leader, he must carry out a change sooner the better.
Right. Ambassador Thayal, now from, diplomatic point of view, from the soft aggression that several countries would demonstrate or could have demonstrated, the moment this news broke in about Wagner Group making advances towards Moscow. We were actually monitoring the situation. It was UK, it was the European Union, Germany, France, all of them had responded within seconds. And that particular aspect, from a totally, international and geopolitical point of view, how do you read the assessment from such hostile countries, I would say, as far as Russia is concerned, in situations like these where you have a domestic issue that could actually be putting you under the scanner as far as your global image is concerned? So for Putin, how critical it was at this time around his image and his country's image and his country's stand?
I think President Vladimir Putin's image has been heavily dented of a strong man, of a person who is in total control of all aspects, all sections of the Russian system, of the Russian society. His military intelligence has totally failed in anticipating what happened. His military on the field, military commanders have totally failed in containing it. So going back to your first question to the general, I think he has to replace because there is an absolute evident failure of the top leadership down from Shoigu right down. But again, I will raise that question that Shoigu is from some home guard kind of a organization. Does Putin trust real generals? Suppose a general comes, like in Pakistan, he will say, why should I share power with Putin? I would rather take, because democracy is over, as all of us know. It is only a fig leaf of democracy in Russia. Now, party is not very strong, with Putin is the party. So a defense minister or an army chief, like in Pakistan, will say, why should I share power with Putin? So he is in a great fix, I would say. But his international image has been dented. And I'm sure the Western intelligence agencies would immediately contact Prigozhin as soon as he lands in Belarus and say, what do you want? And engineer a coup, and they will come into play immediately.
Right. Let me go to General Sudhakar and ask him. General Sudhakar, the entire scenario as it's emerging right now, there are these shadowy figures, and you can't really make a judgment about, like you said about the defense minister, and you said that it's a very important position. Of course it is. But Shoigu, if you look at Shoigu, I mean, the thing is that what does one make of him? Where ambassador left and you took over. I mean, he took over. And the thing is that, is he the fall guy? Because in this entire, we are friends today and I was making hot dogs for you and I was your chef, to somebody, who challenged Putin. Do you think that the defense minister was a fall guy because he was extremely vulnerable? The entire story for me actually revolves around vulnerability, whether it is defense, whether it is diplomatics, whether it's anything else.
Well, Sudha, I must compliment you for the question you are raising. I tend to agree with what the ambassador is saying. But to respond to your query in simplest form, yes, he is going to be the fallen guy very soon, as per my assessment. Whether he is currently or not, that is anybody's guess. But to get somebody who's proficient in home guard duties and leadership role in home guard into a military this thing, firstly, the degree of acceptability is going to be judged. The military leaders will not take the man on top in the vertical seriously. So therefore, I don't know why he's done it. Maybe because they have something like, the police people are there. They have specialist elements there to give them different forms. One is called a FBS, the other one is called FOS. Different kinds of layers of security system existing in Russia. They have got special forces. So therefore, to penetrate all these layers and strike Putin is going to be a tall order. It's very, very difficult. And look at the popularity, like the ambassador very rightly brought out. Everyone in the world thought that perhaps he will turn out to be an unpopular leader. Today, the popularity is upswing, is going beyond 87%. So that's a very high percentage. So therefore, coming back to the point, to answer your question in a little more, different manner, I would say it will be wise on part of Putin to carry out a replacement, get this gentleman defense minister to another appointment, which his internal security is in turmoil today.
Right.
It is being threatened. If that gets penetrated, his own existence is going to be a big question. He must actually divert him to the internal law and order or internal security apparatus, and the external, as far as the military organization is concerned, it should be headed by somebody who's had some past experience. There are 5 or 6 names which are floating around. I have written down in my diary. The senior-most guy who's got a proven credibility of having performed so well outstandingly, and he enjoys the goodwill of Putin, should be the one he should actually select and put him as the defense minister.
Right, because the question now is about who he can trust, because his trust has been broken, which led to this 36 hours of unrest. We've completely run out of time in our first segment, and let me thank both of you, Ambassadors Kanrajan Tayal, many thanks, and also Major General Sudhakarji, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you.
And now it's time to look at a film which actually puts the focus on what exactly is the Wagner militia. Take a look.
They are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war.
If they do something which is illegal as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them.
In 2014, the Wagner Group gained prominence for fighting alongside Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. It was founded by a Ukrainian-born Russian army officer, Dmitry Utkin, and he was working with military intelligence GRU. Utkin is reportedly a Nazi sympathizer and named his group after Richard Wagner. He's a German composer whose works were appropriated by Hitler. So, out here, the Wagner Group seems to be a brainchild of an intelligence agency created to fulfill the objective of its political master without being under the legal framework of a regular army. And of course, the master is obviously Vladimir Putin.
It is Prigozhin, who is a businessman very, very close to Putin. He has actually taken over this group, and now he constituted the Wagner Group, and now he is heading the Wagner Group. And officially, this group has been recognized by Russia as listed as a private company in 2022. President Putin is not directly dealing with Wagner Army, though it is supposed to be affiliated under the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Armed Forces. Some of them are special forces officers from the Spetsnaz group, but majority of them are the people who are the criminals.
TV9 को विशेष तौर पर इजाजत मिली है, उन्हें आमंत्रित किया गया है कि हम वैगनर ग्रुप के हेडक्वार्टर को दिखाएं। आज TV9 के कैमरे पर आप वो देख रहे हैं जो कभी नहीं देखा होगा।
It was like a surprise for me when I saw that their headquarters. It was a 24-floor building, a very high quality building. I have even not seen such kind of building in New York or Paris. I just joked with the guy who was coordinating with me for the Wagner headquarters that am I in Langley or am I in some KGB headquarters? And he was saying, no, you are in a corporate office.
Such forces not always work in uniform. Such forces are so trained and recruited in a manner in which they can do multifarious tasks. There would be some people in this force who would work in civilian dress and make friends and gather intelligence. There will be some who will be hardcore, who may even get tasks of assassination somebody. They are reasonably well organized in the same pattern and lines as the regular army.
It's based on the experience of the person, his physical condition, his age, and his intellect level. So it's very specific.
They were saying that we are actually trying to build a new kind of force, and if you see after Bakhmut, finally they proved that they are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
The capture of Bakhmut city by Wagner is possibly the first time a mercenary group has fulfilled such a vital military objective and set a new standard in conventional warfare. The city has been flattened completely, and then the Wagner Group handed over the city to the Russian regulars, who then gave up all the advantages, suffered reverses as Ukrainian forces captured some nearby villages. And this led to a public outburst by the Wagner chief. And this suggests, clearly indicates that the Russian regulars and the militia are not on the same page, suggesting that a two-pronged war effort such as this has its drawbacks.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war, because the army will always be uncomfortable with a private army and a regular army would not like anyone else to take credit for capture of a Bakhmut, which has been just going on since last 10 months.
It was a big pressure on Russian army that they have to also perform. So what I realized that after a certain period of time, if any country is going on war, they would like to hire any private military company like Wagner or anyone else.
So it's a multi-dimensional, multicultural, multitasking force, not under the purview of the law. As far as the world is concerned, if they do something which is illegal, as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them under a war crime, because Russian government says no, they are not under a regular military law.
Some countries have flirted with the idea of private contractors to wage a war. Of course, most notably is the US, which they did in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Wagner Group's success in the battlefields of Ukraine is now being seen as a dangerous template, but opposed by many, including those in India.
Private army is of no relevance. If we even think about it, it is something like Pakistan. They created, the ISI created so many terrorist groups. Where are those terrorists today? They are impacting them finally. So they had a problem the Russian army had a problem of motivation, of morale, of recruits not coming forth, and therefore India, there is no dearth of recruitment.
There are countries and regions where Wagner people have been used, say for example in Syria, in Lebanon, in South Africa, but they will only go and fight in these areas in support of the Russian interest.
The concept of private armies is more prevalent in authoritarian regimes, but it can also be seen as private contractors in countries with democratic setups, but at a smaller scale when we compare it to the Wagner Group. So the fallout of using such private armies can be messy. But from a very brute military point of view, private militia can help in situations where regular armies cannot.
Well, there you saw my colleague Justin Thomas bringing you up to speed with what this Wagner Group is, something that has been making headlines, and obviously for all the wrong reasons, at least for Russia. Vladimir Putin is a man who had a sigh of relief after Belarusian President Lukashenko intervened, and he literally changed the course of this advance that the Wagner Group was making towards Moscow. Now, why Lukashenko would do that, we will be discussing that in the course of this show. I'm joined by my colleague Sudha Sadanand here. But before that, obviously, when this news broke out at least 36 hours ago, the kind of perception that was built on the social media was more against the Putin forces, and the way it was projected, the way the responses were coming in, it looked like Putin might have just lost ground and is going to concede, and what impact it would have on the Ukrainian fight. That was also something which was put under scanner. To discuss the matters further, we are joined by Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, the former diplomat, and Major General Sanjay Meston, defense expert. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking time out on this Sunday to discuss this matter, which obviously has raised many eyebrows. And let me begin with you, Major General Meston, first. We saw your inputs on the Wagner Group and how they are constituted and what role have they played so far for Putin. A big loss of face, that is a given thing as far as Putin's own private army was concerned, and it's turning its table against him. But my question, what I wanted to begin with you first here is, the social media the way it dominated the proceedings, the Russian reversal news that came, and the disinformation war. In this day and age, Major General Meston, how do you see the information dissemination also plays to the benefit or to the loss of a particular party in the war?
Yeah, information warfare, I would put it, it's a very, very important in any warfare. And it goes to advantage of both sides, and who can actually put out the narrative better in a faster time frame, because first report is always first report. So it matters, and therefore it's got lot of relevance in today's environment, and it has actually always remained so. It matters, but today, since accessibility of social media is there to a common man also. Earlier, it was restricted to the armed forces, whatever news was there. But today, even the civilians, for example, now Rostov, the Prigozhin forces were operating in Rostov. You had all reports coming up even from the Russian media. Yesterday I was watching Russian TV. Now obviously they were getting all these reports is from the locals over there. And of course, Prigozhin has used social media very effectively. In fact, he has a large fan following. So therefore, this aspect of information warfare is of supreme essence. And in fact, today I would say for any armed forces, besides the military operational preparedness and everything, information warfare is given top priority. And therefore, a counter to that is how to prevent that. That is another important aspect. And that is why today you have counter social propaganda aspects also. You even today create something. I've been watching Russian television, and sometimes their propaganda is so good. I see even against President Biden or all the top leaders of the Western countries, they show them in such a disarray state of mind. So, and the people are watching it. So every country uses it effectively, but I think probably Russians are using it very, very effectively, but sometimes it also misfires. And it has misfired sometimes. How it is misfired here, Prigozhin's social media following was there, and he had the liberty and audacity to display or give out all his problems. At least since 3 to 5 months, we have been watching. Sometimes he's been, stating against the defense minister and the CGS. So it was allowed to be projected, and I do not know. Even I was wondering when this so-called mutiny was going on yesterday, that what would be the steps which Russian government would like to take to prevent, because his forces were split in two parts. Prigozhin's forces. One was obviously in Rostov, and the other they were advancing towards Moscow, and they had almost reached about 300 kilometers short of that, and they had also occupied one small township. So that is the question: is that how Putin would have controlled them? Because once you cut off the media accessibility to your people, it matters. And I think another thing would have happened, because the first question is the Russian troops are along the Ukraine border, wherever they are deployed, the captured areas. Were they aware about it? I perhaps feel that perhaps the restriction would have been there, because if the soldiers would have come to know operating on ground, this kind of a scenario is occurring, I think it could have bad ramifications for the professionalism and operational efficiency of the Russian army. So your question, I just answered, it's got lot of impact today.
Yeah, he
and
says,
every country,
General Saab said that lot of impact. Pankaj, this entire thing was started on social media, Telegram. Where he came, that is, the chief of the Wagner army, and he, Prigozhin, and he started, accusing, we have seen him using cuss words also in the past. Let's make so it was all started there. But, I think there are two sides to it. If you look at it, one is the state-run, state-controlled media in Russia. They had one story where they almost tried to say everything is hunky-dory, and they painted the other picture. And on the other hand was other social media which spoke about, of course, Prigozhin and all the other aspects. Don't you think it is very difficult for the people sitting the theatre of war to decide what is genuine?
Absolutely, and that's what I wouldn't say that's the beauty of this, but that's the thin line that actually makes
maybe the ambassador difference. Can also, you say it's a thin line. Ambassador Trignath, do you think that this is a very, very important challenge for diplomats now? diplomats sit there and they talk about strategies and they strategize, they go back to the storyboard again and again. But today, I mean, we saw Arab Spring, we've seen several other cases where the disinformation or the misinformation, to be more precise, seems to be actually ruling the roost. So what does one do?
Well, as you know, that this is called gray zone warfare that is often used between the states and not within the country. But here, since the biggest threat to President Putin during this whole war right now has come from his own protege. This guy used to be Putin's chef. And he was brought in here essentially to fight the Ukrainians at the Blackwater forces of the Americans, which have also been deployed in Ukrainian war. And he was pretty successful, in fact. Even when the Russian forces were not able to do that well, he was able to hold on to Bakhmut and kept on fighting because he has no holds barred. So, but it seemed as if he was taking an advantage over Defense Minister Shoigu and General Gerasimov, whom he has been accusing of not supporting him, not sending supplies. So he has this direct contest with the Defense Minister Shoigu. Now, of course, he had probably taken a route which was bound to fail. I mean, it was not going to succeed in any way. But at the same time, there are several oligarchs in the country who have been shutted out by Putin, and they have been working against Putin for a very long time. They are the ones, the Western intelligence is also operating, trying to work on this situation. And I find that this is a scenario which would have given him some kind of, and inside the Kremlin there might be a grouping which would have fallen out eventually, and this fellow decided that I must go and give a point and convey to Putin that he is a better person to handle the affairs rather than Shoigu. He basically wanted Shoigu and Gerasimov, General Gerasimov, to go. And that's precisely the case because his Wagner Group has been very successful in many countries. We have seen it outside also, even on the border. So he must have generated this kind of a confidence and tried to do that. And he used social media to communicate with this. But the question is essentially that what is going to happen to him? He realized his limitations. And he went back, and I mean, they are going back. He will be in exile now, most likely in Belarus, and you don't know whether he'll survive or not. Most of these people, probably Shoigu's design was to absorb the people into the army and try to create something new, which will operate abroad. So it is a bigger game that is going on, except for the social media. That continues. One thing is for sure, that the Russians did not want to fight the Russians. I mean, this is not fighting the Ukrainians or somebody outside. It is Russians fighting against the Russians. And these people who are there in his army are also, many of them are ex-army, ex-intelligence, and people from even some of the convicts. So I think that this is, and it was a creation of Putin himself, which we call in Russia as Siloviki. The deep state in Russia is called Siloviki, and that is all security people. And they are all very close to these guys. So I think this guy Prigozhin, in my view, just overstepped and was overconfident of the kind of support that was probably promised to him. And he obviously, for the moment, failed in it.
But Ambassador, the thing is that you say, I mean, I'm very intrigued and very interested by what you're saying. He overstepped, but then there was a major chink in Putin's kind of armor. You know, there was I mean, whatever he had fortified so far, there were major gaps in it. Otherwise, they were chums, you know, they were friends, they were eating hot dogs together. I mean, we know that, you know, he has been very, very close to Putin, and suddenly, of course, it's a cliched story, you know, where the friend turns into foe, but that shows Putin up, as in that he is not an efficient administrator at all, as he was made out to be, despite Ukraine.
Well, I don't think that is a correct assessment. If you had known how Putin's mind works or how he works himself, and no emperor, leader, autocrat, or is immune from the chinks in the armor. There are your own people who see Ravana ka time pe aapne dekha that this was Vibhishan who brought him down. So there is always the case. You create a Bhasmasur and that's what eventually going to happen. They become ambitious. There are other people. But this fellow has been giving signals for a very long time. Now there is another thing, I mean theory there. Shoigu, defense minister, is also slated to be in line to take over after Putin goes away. And I doubt very much that, that it could be possible to convey a message to Shoigu. We'll have to see now whether the defense minister or the generals are changed, not immediately, maybe in a short while. Because Putin is not happy with the way the war has been going, you know that. I mean, he has been for the last 10 years working on creating a smart, autonomous, very important army. He has a lot of funds have been given, and it is a known fact that because of the corruption, because of misinformation given to him, he was not able to, he took the decisions that he took. And so that's a failure on his part that his own people probably did not brief him correctly. But at the same time, I think that there is much more which is going to come now, and whether Prigozhin will continue to live, that is another very major point now, because Putin is not going to let this be played out in the public domain beyond the point. And that's precisely why he chose Belarus and Lukashenko to take the lead and convey the message and provide this guy the refuge.
Yes, what Ambassador Trivnayat is mentioning is quite true there, because the geographical positioning of Belarus and the interest that it served both, amicably for Russia and Belarus both. We have seen that since the beginning of the war also, because the international community, Poland being a NATO ally, but Belarus on the other hand, on the other side, siding with Russia, that was very crucial. And Putin knows it very well also. In terms of, the role of Yevgeny Prigozhin, Major General Meston, help us understand here, if there is a Yevgeny Prigozhin on one side fighting the war for Putin, there is also Ramzan Kadyrov, who is one of the Chechen leaders. Now, we will touch upon in detail what Kadyrov is and what his role is till date. But from a strategic point of view, from a, armed force point of view, if you could help us understand how justified it is as of now to have a private army, while you can have it to quell any uprising within your country, but when it comes to international borders, these fighters who have been engaged in warfare with Ukraine for a long time now, even before the official declaration of war with Ukraine. Do you believe that all the international laws or the prisoners of war and all those rules apply on these fighters, these private fighters, be it Chechen or be it the Wagner Group?
There are many aspects to this question. First is how feasible it is to do strategically. Let's take the Indian model. We have never had this concept, and we can, as a soldier, if I am deployed, like I was commanding my division in Firozpur, I can't even imagine a private army functioning close to me independently, and I can understand what the army is a professional organization. They are supposed to function. It has a proper command control. It has logistics. It has intelligence. It's a large number of factors. It is not that one independent identity is placed somewhere and they start functioning independently. And also you are supposed to not support them. This is actually the whole problem, and this is where Prigozhin has also overstepped, because this actually was not a suitable, suitable deployment to use along the borders for fighting a war. It is like someone else fighting someone else's war. This war was of the Russian army, not of this Prigozhin. Now, how they should be used? I do agree that this force was created private army. So they have to be, obviously, first is they need to be used independently. Now, where? Independently, we have so many examples. They have been used very effectively in Africa. They have changed some regimes. They have gone to Syria, and so many, we are all aware about it. I'll not dwell on that. So here, now since priority was Ukraine, they could have been used inside Ukraine. All those covert operations and everything should have been actually done by these people. Now, even coming on to the Chechen rebels, I again wonder, why should a professional army, Russian army is considered as one of the finest professional armies in the world. And from day one, I actually failed to understand how these Chechen rebels were inducted to fight along. Then the Wagner Group was fighting. So this reflects something on the professional army or professionalism of the Russian army. And I luckily have operated with a number of these countries and in my appointments. So one has also been in the intelligence. So I have realized that there is a broad conceptual issue in the Western world. The decision making is left right up to the sergeants. They are very, very effective. In the so-called these China and Russia, this is the biggest drawback. Like even when I was commanding my brigade in Nathula, and the Chinese were opposite me, I just found their NCOs, or similarly the NCOs in the army of Russia, their decision making and they seem to be quite ineffective. So therefore, they will only follow what the orders are given by their officers. Now even coming on to the orders of officers. See, Prigozhin, when he overstepped this, and we'll also come to why he overstepped this question you had asked. First and foremost is why this situation has arisen. That we have to understand. See, conceptually, Putin was aware about it, that he has deployed Wagner for in a particular area. Now, Putin has realized 3-4 important aspects. One is that this army, so-called the private army, actually delivered the best results so far in the battle. Capture of Bakhmut took a lot of time. It almost took about 8 to 10 months, but it was only done by Wagner Group. That is point one. And therefore, his professional efficiency was seen, and it reflected very bad on the performance of the Russian army.
Right.
Obviously, Russian army, especially their CGS and the defense minister, when Soledar was captured, now they knew Bakhmut is the most symbolic place which they have to capture. So therefore, what they started doing, they refused to give them ammunition in the correct manner what they should have given. So they were dividing their fighting skills, and ammunition is one of the most important aspects. And because of this, what was the outcome? Outcome was he was compelled, he was forced to project his view to President Putin through social media. Now he couldn't have direct connection over there because see, every day
let me come. Yeah, so you know we actually we have several other questions for you, General Saab, and I'll come to you because you know as the day progresses and as we see the story where it goes nail biting 36 hours, I'll have to go to Ambassador Trignayath, who's been waiting very patiently. Thank you, Ambassador, for your patience. Now the role of Lukashenko. Now the thing is that what one reads is, it's very intriguing here, and I keep coming back to that because it seems the man stepped in and he said, okay, this is it, you come to Belarus. Backroom parleys, calls, conference calls, meetings, etc., etc. But I come to you. All this seems very regular, very routine. What do you think was Lukashenko's role in actually suggesting that Prigozhin now takes refuge in Belarus?
See, Lukashenko is the closest ally of Putin today. Both the countries have a closest security partnership. Lukashenko had even suggested at one time to have a union with Russia. And he has stood by Putin all along. Earlier, it used to be his governorate, as you know, in the Soviet times. So he is the most trusted guy for him. Now, Putin himself is at the helm of affairs. Now, this man, Prigozhin, and many others like him, or oligarchs, whom Putin entertains, but they are not his equals. So Putin by himself would not talk directly to this guy, and because he considered that going into public domain, what he has done and marching on to Moscow was a treason. And he had to say that. Now, at the same time, it has served two purposes. It would have also constrained both Shoigu and General Gerasimov, because they have also been in the wrong, as General Meston said, not supplying arms ammunition. So Putin is watching that, and he has seen the success of this person, Prigozhin, and he only owed his loyalty to Putin. And when he social media, he said that Putin is mistaken about who is the traitor. Now, so he's again trying to convey the message the traitors are basically those people who misled Putin and continue to mislead him. So how do you work with this person who has a dual personality, in the sense he has a personal ambitions. He also naturally feels that he has got the victory or whatever in Bakhmut and has held back the American, the British, all the European and the Ukrainian forces from entering into the place. And so he has this thing. So now he cannot be just like that. So who is the person who can do that? Now, he cannot come into Russia. He will not be welcome at all because then it will become another pillar and pole. So Putin obviously asked Lukashenko to talk to this person and asked him to withdraw immediately where it is. And he is doing it too well. Of course, Prigozhin realized his limitations. More importantly, as I said earlier, that Putin is very well entrenched in his system and he rules that system. So he understands where, how, because he doesn't trust anyone that way. In order to, blindly go ahead and trust anybody. So that's why he would have asked this guy to negotiate. And of course, this crisis has fizzled out. But I don't think that it is over as yet because it has, as you rightly mentioned, that it has been the biggest challenge for Putin, internal challenge, I would call it, for him. And therefore, I don't see that eventually Prigozhin will be allowed to continue. But he would have probably used Prigozhin also to convey the message to Shoigu and others in the system that behave, otherwise you're going to go.
Right. Ambassador Trignath, the developments that we were monitoring, the way it came, Sudha, it's worth noting here that when last evening, when this information came in that suddenly Prigozhin has chosen not to march ahead to Moscow, citing reasons that he did not intend to have quote-unquote bloodshed, unnecessary bloodshed. Now, this is a typical Major General Meston would help us understand.
I'm sorry I'm interrupting. Look at that image. Does that seem even plausible that something like let's not spill blood come from the man like him?
No, I mean, to run a private army once again is no mean business.
He's aggressive. He is an oligarch. There is no doubt about it. You were saying. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And so it's, it's a commander-like situation where he wouldn't say, okay, there have been some back-channel talks, so we are receding or we are changing our course. That was not going to happen. Now, on the other hand, what Lukashenko and what Ambassador Trignath was also mentioning, he actually cut a deal with Prigozhin, saying that all the charges against him will be dropped. He would be given safe haven in Belarus. And his troops, the 25,000, as they say, they never leave their men behind. And they live by that code. So those 25,000 militia or fighters or whatever we want to call them, trained soldiers, they would sign, service with the Russian Defense Ministry. Now, this is something that Prigozhin was not happy about. He did not want his army to be a part of the Russian Defense Ministry to a certain extent, because he wanted to set an example out of them. Major General Meston, what I intend to ask here is, now what lies ahead for, especially for Prigozhin and his 25,000 troop, because to forget about everything, to think that nothing happened, do you believe this is actually we are looking at some sort of a scenario which might appear to exist but won't endure the test of time?
Very true. The aspect now is, firstly, what is going to happen to Prigozhin? And I totally agree with Ambassador Trignath that whatever it is, firstly, we do not know where is he. Actually, it has been stated that he is heading towards Belarus, but after that, this man who has been so effective on the social media, after his last statement that we didn't want loss of Russian lives, no bloodshed, nothing has been heard from him. So that is a little mysterious aspect. Secondly, why has he agreed to this deal, which has been brokered by Lukashenko? There is again something amiss in that. Yesterday he was so abrasive in his statements, and he also said anyone who blocks us and stops us, we are going for justice, we will eliminate him, and that those kind of words were there, and we are heading towards Moscow. The aggressiveness which was shown, and he was also talking to two generals, one was a deputy defense minister and Rostov. He was also quite aggressive with them. What has suddenly happened that everything has changed? No, I think he probably took a very abrasive decision. Probably he realized that nothing is going to, he's not going to make any headway because he stated he's going to Moscow. Firstly, even if he would have reached, what would he have achieved? Number two is his troops, which were numbering about 25,000, would they have sided with him throughout? Because sometimes, troops are just told that we are going for something else and, President, anything. Because I know how these things function, so you can mislead your soldiers, his private army. So they probably have been misled. And now the fact of the matter is, why is he relented when he was so aggressive? And why has Putin also, who was so strong in his statement that we will deal with a person who has been involved in treachery against the nation, how come? So I think both parties realize that now the situation is such they have to look for an escape route. For President Putin, supposing he would have announced himself, I give you, this, I don't investigate anything and I spare you, it would have been loss of face. So therefore, the Lukashenko was brought, and it is now appeared that it is all through Lukashenko everything has happened, and President Putin has promised. But let me be candid. President Putin is going to finally task him in some manner. He will eliminate him. The Russian way is that he is not going to survive probably more than 1 year. And now we will not hear much about this man Prigozhin.
Yeah, but
So
I want to stop here, General Meston, and I'm sorry for interjecting. I want to understand that, the other side of it is how come, the chief of the Wagner army, who was so aggressive and in your face all through, suddenly seemed to have receded. Is it also correct to presume that somebody within the system, that is within the Russian army, had perhaps promised him all the support and later retracted?
Yeah, that possibility does exist because, this will always remain a mystery as to how he has just taken a 180-degree turn. So what promise? But then, even if he were promised, and then why is he gone to Belarus? So there are a large number of question marks. And I think one thing is very mysterious is we are not hearing anything from him. And I think now we may not even hear about him. Or he may say something very late and try to support President Putin because he knew he will not be able to make any headway. And now coming on to the CGS and the defense minister, will President Putin remove both of them? It's a very tricky thing because after all, they are his most closest confidants who have been advising him. And as per Prigozhin, they are giving him wrong advice. They are speaking lies. They are corrupt and they are following a bureaucratic approach, which I agree. The Russian system is actually quite this way. There is a lot of bureaucracy involved. So the question now arises, what happens to his 25,000 people? Firstly, the announcement was very clear that some of them will join the Russian army or they will sign that contract. And the others who will not join, they will be left scot-free, no action will be taken. Now, how are these people also going to go to Belarus? Where are they going to be? So these are a lot of unanswered questions. But the private army, the way it is, I think nothing much will be done against them because they are innocent soldiers. They will follow where their so-called charismatic leader has, just misguided them or whatever he has done. He has tried to motivate in some manner.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, Major Meston, also Ambassador Trigunath, what appears as of now is the worst, if not over, has been averted for some time for both Putin and for Yevgeny Prigozhin. But talking in terms of the diplomatic slugfest, the kind of pressure that Russia was feeling and still is under from the international community. I mean, this morning also, morning newspapers say that how Chinese armory has been thrown open for the Russian consumption and how the bullets and arms and ammunitions are finding its way to Moscow for the fight against Ukraine. Also, we have known how the US and the West has responded. Now, if someone can place themselves in Putin's shoes, do you believe that from the diplomatic offensive point of view, this particular incident has somewhere gave Putin some sleepless nights and has caused some irreparable damage to him?
Well, that is very true. I mean, this is something, he was his own man, the Prigozhin. And as I said, that he has gone overboard and probably took the wrong way to approach Putin to take action against Shoigu and General Gerasimov. But the fact remains is that Putin doesn't care about the international, whatever the Western countries, they are their enemies. He is ready to fight them, and very often people see that why is he not deploying the Russian army fully in Ukraine and all that. In my view, and this is maybe wrong, absolutely, I'm not a defense person. General Meston knows better. That he knows that at one point or the other he'll have to have a direct fight with the West, with the NATO. So he has prepared for that, in terms of his man material and everything. And therefore, he's trying to use whatever is the younger population, because this is a war which is a prolonged one, which will continue like that. It's a war by stealth, war by choice. I mean, this is something where he's indirectly fighting the Europeans and Americans there. But whenever, at any given time, that is perhaps his calculation that if a direct war happens, but this particular incident coming out in the open has obviously conveyed the kind of message to the world, that especially the Western world, which has played it up very well, thinking that there is going to be a demise of Putin and that there is something like that. But I think he's a survivor, and he knows how to do things in these kind of situations, and that's what precisely he has done at the moment, and tried to silence his critics. And as far as calls are concerned, Turkish president spoke to him, the Iranian foreign minister spoke to his counterpart, the Chinese have been talking to them. And so he has those friends, who are continuing to be concerned about what is happening in the war, because they are also working closely with him. So that will be there. But I think that in Putin's strategy at the moment is not to let these things happen again, and he wants to perhaps convey a message eventually. And also, as I said, it is not only a message to Prigozhin, it is also a message to Shoigu and General Gerasimov together.
Ambassador, I want you to focus on Ramzan Kadyrov, the other character, who pledged support to Putin. Of course, we know, for the benefit of the viewers, we must mention what is Ramzan's role in it. Most people know that he was supported, not only him, but also his father was supported by Putin in a major way. But then when you look at it diplomatically, this leader from Chechnya, what is in it for him? Support of Putin, but then, yeah.
Well, as you know that in 1999 and 2000, when Putin came on the scene, became prime minister and the president, the first thing he had to handle was these Chechen wars. At that time, his father was the one who was there. And the Putin forces fought and eventually installed Kadyrov, and then subsequently his son, this current Ramzan Kadyrov. Now, obviously, they offered to fight, because when they saw that the that their forces on the border, the Russians needed more people, and they had to go in for more recruitment. So obviously, he as a friend offered, and they are also, they know fighting both. They have a specialty. That specialty is not fighting directly on the border, but also inside. The civilian fighting, door-to-door type of fighting. They are experts in that. And therefore, when the Russians were thinking of that there would be a siege of Kiev, and they would require that expertise, which is extremely important in this scenario, because you can't just take over the whole city and do that. So he has been there, and he has supported. He's part of Russia. Chechnya is part of Russia, but it is a republic. So obviously, I think this is a overall strategy. I would say very similar to why Wagner Group was deployed, to why Ramzan Kadyrov was also deployed, which I just said in the previous question.
General Meston, I want to ask General Meston one question. Lots of reports coming that, how this man, right behind this, Prigozhin, look at him, the mystery of it. Apparently, one of the mysteries which were unraveled was, Pankaj, that how he spoke with his army very regularly. Right. He motivated them. He gave them confidence. So I want to ask you, Major General Meston, Khuda na khasta, that will never come to our country. But imagine that someone who's an oligarch, who's obviously a rogue, when it comes to, is also a mercenary, he's today been compared as against Putin and how he has dealt with the Russian army as against him. I mean, even as the 36-hour face-off was going on, apparently Prigozhin was there, and again, there was a lot of chat about how he can do what Putin cannot do. Do you think that's a failure on the part of Putin, or you think someone is actually eulogizing this oligarch?
Very difficult to say whether it is failure of Putin, but I would put it in a very different manner. See, firstly, their employability has been a big question mark. Why to use such a private army?
Hanji.
And you yourself said, can we visualize this scenario in Indian army? Never. We just can't even visualize. And why to use a private army within the confines of a professional army? Let them fight their battle. They should have been used independently the way they are doing in Syria or Libya or wherever it is in Africa. So that is point one. Now, Prigozhin, the kind of personality he has actually been allowed to proliferate. And I think here, to some extent, I would also state President Putin has gone wrong in his assessment. He had so much of faith, not in his armed forces. He had so much of faith in person like Kadyrov or a person like Prigozhin. The president of a country cannot have this kind of faith on some outsiders. Can today our Supreme Armed Forces or the Prime Minister of India and the Supreme Armed Forces, when I say President of India, start creating some army? When I was in the army, I used to hear Bihar army. I used to hear about it. Of course, I know it was for other reasons. But can you imagine some kind of an army being created by some gentleman, and he's very rich, like a oligarch in India, and he's using it? So these kind of things actually are very impractical. And it is something like, I can give you a very live example, Pakistan, ISI, Taliban, and all these elite. Who are they? They are their own people. They have created them. Where are they hitting them? They are hitting them back. So ultimately what happens, people create such organizations for their vested interest. And after all, President Putin also realized, and all these people who are functioning under him, see, in Russia, why are they today in Central Asian Africa? Why are they in all these Mali and other places? There's a lot of gold there, mining. So, and when I was in the United Nations, back in Rwanda and Mozambique, I remember, and I don't hesitate to point it out, the Russians who were deployed there, the soldiers, they were involved in smuggling, and they had deployed their own aircrafts, which had the UN logo. And they were smuggling out gold and all these kind, to the extent they used to even carry some UN vehicles on which UN vehicle was written. So there is a game of money, there is a game of corruption, and today to stay in power, both the things are very essential. Money is also required. After all, from where is this chap giving them salary? He's got no source of income. He's not a part of the state. So this all money is coming from Africa and everything, and he's got huge fundings. And therefore, he's giving money to these people. Similarly, in Afghanistan, we had all these governors having their localized armies, the warlords. Who were funding them? Not the Afghan army, not the United States. They were all being funded by these people. The governors. Now, from where are the governors getting money? From all illegal way, drug trade and smuggling along the Central Asian public borders. So this is a game of corruption. Huge money is involved, and that is how these people fight. Why would someone be ready to fight? He's not part of a system where he'll tomorrow die, he'll get a pension. And have we ever seen Prigozhin or Wagner army people dying some kind of a ceremonial thing being given for burial and all? Nothing. They are just, in fact, this is what Prigozhin stated, we are left to just drown in a river, and our soldiers are dying, no one is caring for it. So a private army only fights, Taliban only fight, jihadis only fight, not because motivation, it is money. And they are given more money at times than regular army. So that becomes a great motivation aspect. And this is where I think President Putin has gone wrong. He had sensed that something is amiss. Probably that was the time he should have dismissed one of these two generals, that is, of course, the defense minister and General Gerasimov, because they are the ones who are in constant touch with Putin, briefing him. And now if he dismisses both of them, I think that he will not do it, because then both of them will get united. So President Putin's, nightmares have not over.
No,
Division, there can be possible division in his armed forces and top leadership. So he will not dismiss them in the near future. And one of them he can sidestep to some other lucrative appointment by saying, no, you have done enough. I'm quite sure he will not do that. And probably internal stories are that there are some divisions in the armed forces. You look in the Pakistan army, when they had to nominate the chief, there's so many internal divisions. And I also
this model, Major General Meston, sorry, I'm stopping you there. You made your point amply clear that in situations like these, high value, where the stakes are high, the armed forces obviously need a lot of coordination, and the best example, would be the Indian Army as of now here, and we are proud to have you on the panel with Ambassador Trigunayat to actually represent how these situations are handled best, maintaining the ethics and the high standards of the armed forces. Now, Sudha, it is very critical what Major General Meston mentions. It's not the motivation, it's the money that matters here when we talk about private army. Correct me if I'm wrong, Major General Meston, there was a time, Sudha, when this war had broken out, there were flanks and troops of the Russian army that were refusing to go and fight the Ukrainians on the borders. And on the contrary, Putin was using a brutal force to actually make them fall in line and fight against them. Now, this role of private army, Major General Meston, help us understand here very briefly, because Ambassador Trigunayat also is waiting patiently, but I wanted to have your say on this. What role does motivation play here? Because the Russian forces clearly did not have that. Putin had no choice but to employ his Man's Friday, Prigozhin, then Chechen fighters to go and fight for him. Money, I mean, trust me, I mean, that is not in question also here, because $47 million, if they are found stashed in card boxes in St. Petersburg, then one could only imagine that how much money has already been pumped in. Your view on the specific aspect of motivation and commitment, जो पलटन की इज्जत की बात हम करते हैं, वो यहाँ तो नहीं नजर आ रही है.
बिल्कुल, armed forces in the Russian armed forces, that is not being seen from day one. But now coming on to motivation by Prigozhin, I would compliment him. See, he has been dressed always in the attire. He is with his soldiers. He gives a very forceful speech, and he's thrilled with him, with his soldiers. So, being whatever status he has, he's very rich and he's got a lot of money. He could also have been sitting in his headquarters in Moscow and controlling things from here. But what is admirable about this man, besides money, his physical presence mattered, and that is what has motivated them. So motivation and money, they go together. It's not only you give money, someone will fight, and that is why you have to have very, very good leaders. Now, coming on to the leadership of the Russian army, have we ever seen, I have at least not seen, and I've been seeing Russian TV also and most of the media channels, I have never seen this Shagoi ever with his troops. I only saw him once when that bridge was blasted off by the Ukrainians.
Right.
I've never seen Defense Minister, Gary Simo, the CGS, ever with his soldiers, motivating them, giving speech. Here you see this man, Prigozhin, he's been motivating them, giving strong speeches, and this really matters for any soldier, whether he's a private army or terrorist or whatever it is. So leadership is what counts, and leadership is lacking here. Even I have not seen President Putin ever going to his troops. Sometimes in the forward areas, meeting them, that makes an impact. Soldier gets motivated.
That makes an impact, you're saying, and absolutely right. We're completely running out of time. So, Ambassador Trigunayat, I want to ask you three things, if you can, for the benefit of the viewers. What next? Where does it all go from here?
Well, as the way the Russian system works, I think that we have also during discussions brought out these points. What happens to Prigozhin, because his days are numbered, that is something given. What happens to Shoigu? And I think that Shoigu probably also may have not listened to Putin or something like that, but not providing the requisite assistance that these people were asking from there. For whatever reason, I mean, because with the Wagner forces or Blackwater and all, there is a a possibility of deniability of the state's involvement. But that is very clear because they are private armies, so you can deny culpability in that. And that's one reason. But I think that Putin now is under pressure. This is not something that will just blow over like that for him internally. And he'll be doing his internal assessments exactly how to reorganize and, for that matter, re strategize with the forces and with others. I mean, how he's going to move forward because Wagner forces are not only here on the border, there are several done even now operating in Sudan, in Libya, in some other Syria, and elsewhere. So, I mean, how their chain of command will work eventually, that is to be remains to be seen. So, I think that this will we will not come to know it openly in time, in real time. It will all come up later, as and when the signs appear, people are removed or new people are appointed. So, I think that this will give him a time to really have a fuller assessment of exactly where the strategy is going wrong.
On that note, thank you very much, Ambassador Anil Trigunath, for a riveting conversation, and General Sanjay Mestan. Thank you indeed. And before we leave you, this is a documentary, a very, very detailed documentary or film on who exactly is Wagner militia and who leads it and why are they in existence in the first place. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Pankaj.
Thank you.
They are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war.
If they do something which is illegal as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them.
In 2014, the Wagner Group gained prominence for fighting alongside Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. It was founded by a Ukrainian-born Russian army officer, Dmitry Utkin, and he was working with military intelligence GRU. Utkin is reportedly a Nazi sympathizer and named his group after Richard Wagner. He's a German composer whose works were appropriated by Hitler. So, out here, the Wagner Group seems to be a brainchild of an intelligence agency created to fulfill the objective of its political master without being under the legal framework of a regular army. And of course, the master is obviously Vladimir Putin.
It is Prigozhin, who is a businessman very, very close to Putin. He has actually taken over this group and now he constituted the Wagner Group and now he is heading the Wagner Group. And officially, this group has been recognized by Russia as listed as a private company in 2022. President Putin is not directly dealing with Wagner army, though it is supposed to be affiliated under the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Armed Forces. Some of them are special forces officers from the Spetsnaz group, but majority of them are the people who are the criminals.
TV9 को विशेष तौर पर इजाजत मिली है, उन्हें आमंत्रित किया गया है कि हम वैगनर ग्रुप के हेडक्वार्टर को दिखाएं। आज TV9 के कैमरे पर आप वो देख रहे हैं जो कभी नहीं देखा होगा।
It was like a surprise for me when I saw that their headquarters. It was a 24-floor building, a very high quality building. I have even not seen such kind of building in New York or Paris. I just joked with the guy who was coordinating with me for the Wagner headquarters that am I in Langley or am I in some KGB headquarters? And he was saying, no, you are in a corporate office.
Such forces not always work in uniform. Such forces are so trained and recruited in a manner in which they can do multifarious tasks. There would be some people in this force who would work in civilian dress and make friends and gather intelligence. There will be some who will be hardcore, who may even get tasks of assassination somebody. They are reasonably well organized in the same pattern and lines as the regular army.
It's based on the experience of the person, his physical condition, his age, and his intellect level. So it's very specific.
They were saying that we are actually trying to build a new kind of force, and if you see after Bakhmut, finally they proved that they are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
The capture of Bakhmut city by Wagner is possibly the first time a mercenary group has fulfilled such a vital military objective and set a new standard in conventional warfare. The city has been flattened completely, and then the Wagner Group handed over the city to the Russian regulars, who then gave up all the advantages, suffered reverses as Ukrainian forces captured some nearby villages. And this led to a public outburst by the Wagner chief. And this clearly indicates that the Russian regulars and the militia are not on the same page, suggesting that a two-pronged war effort such as this has its drawbacks.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war, because the army will always be uncomfortable with a private army, and a regular army would not like anyone else to take credit for capture of a Bakhmut, which has been just going on since last 10 months.
It was a big pressure on Russian army that they have to also perform. So what I realized that after a certain period of time, if any country is going on war, they would like to hire any private military company like Wagner or anyone else.
So it's a multi-dimensional, multicultural, multitasking force, not under the purview of the law. As far as the world is concerned, if they do something which is illegal, as far as what you call as war crime, then you will not be able to charge them under a war crime, because Russian government says no, they're not under a regular military law.
Some countries have flirted with the idea of private contractors to wage a war. Of course, most notably is the US, which they did in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Wagner Group's success in the battlefields of Ukraine is now being seen as a dangerous template, but opposed by many, including those in India.
Private army is of no relevance. If we even think about it, it is something like Pakistan. They created, the ISI created so many terrorist groups. Where are those terrorists today? They are impacting them finally. So they had a problem the Russian army had a problem of motivation, of morale, of recruits not coming forth, and therefore India, there is no dearth of recruitment.
There are countries and regions where Wagner people have been used, say for example in Syria, in Lebanon, in South Africa, but they will only go and fight in these areas in support of the Russian interest.
The concept of private armies is more prevalent in authoritarian regimes, but it can also be seen as private contractors in countries with democratic setups, but at a smaller scale when we compare it to the Wagner Group. So the fallout of using such private armies can be messy. But from a very brute military point of view, private militia can help in situations where regular armies cannot.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. This and more. streaming on the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Hello and welcome. You're watching News9. I'm Shweta Kothari. Byju's, the education tech startup, is wrestling with troubles at the moment. The latest in a slew of problems at the edtech giant is Deloitte, the auditor of the company that has now resigned for its inability to finalize the audit reports for the financial year ending March of 21 and March of 22, which is FY21 and FY22, citing delays in sharing financial reports from Byju's. The company, Byju's, witnessed an explosive growth during the pandemic, has since been the poster boy of Indian startup ecosystem, valued at around $22 billion just about a year ago. Its fortunes, however, seems to be dwindling at the moment. The company recently defaulted on a loan. It is fighting with its lenders amid layoffs and cost cuts. On top of it is the books that are yet to be audited for financial year 22 and 23. Needless to say, it looks like trouble is now mounting at Byju's. What's more, media reports suggest that Ministry of Corporate Affairs has ordered an inspection of edtech startup over concerns over corporate governance lapses. Joining us on the show at this point in time in the studio is my colleague R. Sridharan. Also joining us is Srinath Sridharan, who's a markets commentator, Jitin Agrawal, who's the director at SW India, Anil Joshi, who's the managing partner at Unicorn India Ventures. Gentlemen, appreciate you all taking time out this afternoon and for joining us to speak to us on this very important issue. I want to directly begin by asking you, Shri, the problems at Byju's are only mounting, and this comes as a latest slew in a series of problems at Byju's.
Yes, you summed it up well, Shweta. Things only seem to get bizarre and more bizarre at Byju's. For a company that's supposedly at peak valuation of $24 billion, the governance norms and the management processes which seem to be in place are probably not even worth of a startup that's just been founded, right? So let's look at some of the reasons why Byju's has not been able to finalize its annual reports. One, they said that we made several acquisitions and we are having trouble compiling and consolidating all these books in time. Now, that's not a reason or an excuse that's going to fly with any reasonable, sensible investor or any stakeholder for that matter. It's very simple. There are companies around the world, in India, elsewhere in the world, that routinely make not just 1, 2, 3, make dozens of acquisitions.
That is correct.
And none of them has any trouble consolidating these books and reporting in time to the authorities, in our case, the Corporate Affairs Ministry and the Registrar of Companies. So that is not a very valid reason. So I think the question which even MCA is asking or is hinting at in some sense is that why is there such an inordinate delay? And why is it that in addition to the delays, there's a massive layoffs happening, cost cutting happening, and if reports are believed, which I think Byju's has denied, there are board level resignations, auditors resigned as well. So these are very, very serious questions which need to be answered by Byju's, and unfortunately, the answers that the company has been putting forward or releasing in its statements have not been very convincing at all.
Absolutely, not convincing at all, to the point that they could not really convince their own auditors. Let's quickly play up that statement that Deloitte has put out, or rather the resignation that we have a copy of, which says, and I quote, Deloitte says that we have not received any communication on the resolution of the audit report modification in respect of year ending 31st of March 2021, the status of audit readiness of the financial statements and the underlying books and records for the year ending 31st of March 2022. As a result, we could not commence audit on time. Those statements are difficult to understand, difficult to digest, especially coming from a company which was once considered to be a poster boy of startup ecosystem. Let me quickly get in Srinath Sridharan. Srinath, you've joined us before and we've discussed this before, but it seems that there is a multiplication effect now, and we'll talk about the board level resignations, if at all. I want to put up that statement as well, because Byju's has denied it, vehemently denied it, but on what's coming in from Deloitte at this point in time, it looks like there is a financial mismanagement at Byju's.
And that's what it looks like. And irrespective of the fact that they've denied that the three representative nominee directors of various investors have resigned, whether they have resigned or not, there's a larger question. For the last 2 years of these financial results, how come these investor representative directors, they're all eminent folks, individuals with much of background, how come they have not done anything about it? And despite that, the last few months, they've still gone ahead and raised debt. When you're raising debt, don't you have a consolidated balance sheet view of what are you raising that debt on? So it's not just the company. Here, I would also, I think somewhere want to bring that point. VCs and PEs simply cannot get a free pass in circumstances like this. Just because they resign doesn't mean that they're not accountable for what they did not do. So I think it's a larger, not just a Byju's problem, but I think it's a sectoral problem. And why do I mention that? The large investors like them have operating partners who are dealing with the company on a regular basis. They have nominee directors, they have board observers. I mean, if I were to be a little sarcastic, most of these founders can't even sneeze without probably prior approvals. And they even every appointment of KMPs, and in most cases, the independent directors are appointed or even selected by these large investors. So why is this kind of eerie silence from these nominee directors is the larger question mark. I think it's the case of the silent dog of the Sherlock Holmes, not the company alone here for me.
Okay. And, you know, I want to repeat it at this point in time because Byju says that the directors, the independent directors have not resigned. So all of this is in fact in the realm of speculation. We cannot independently here on News9 confirm whether there's been a resignation at the board level. But let me also quickly get in Anil Joshi, who's joining us. Anil, I want to understand from you, you know, to break it down. To begin with, Deloitte was the auditor for financial